a creature in a snowy forest. The snowfall had started suddenly. The wind howled through the branches of the pines, scattering fluffy flakes on the ground. Jack's car struggled to navigate the narrow, snow-covered road through the dense forest. Linda sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a warm blanket, staring out the window at the bleak landscape. "This was your idea," she said, seeing Jack frown as he tried to keep his grip on the steering wheel. "To get away from the city to get some fresh air." "That's a good idea," Jack said. "We both needed to get away from this chaos. We should go somewhere warm, not here, where everything seems dead," Linda muttered. "The forest is life," Jack said, but there was more confidence in his voice than in his eyes. When they finally reached the cabin, the sun was beginning to set, coloring the snowy forest with shades of red and orange. The house looked as if it had been there for decades. The wooden walls were weathered, the roof was covered with moss, and the door held on rusty hinges. "Cozy," Linda said sarcastically, looking at the cabin. "It's an adventure," Jack said, picking up their bags and heading for the porch. The creak of floorboards underfoot echoed in the silence. When they opened the door, the inside smelled cold and damp. "It must have been a long time since anyone had lived there," Jack remarked. They quickly built a fire in the fireplace, looked around the rooms, and began unpacking. But by evening, Linda began to notice something strange. "Do you hear that?" Linda asked, looking out the window. Jack lifted his head from his backpack. "What is it? That sound?" She fell silent, listening. Somewhere in the distance, outside the windows, something was creaking and making noise. It didn't sound like wind. "Probably branches scraping on the roof," Jack said, waving his hand. But later, as night fell on the forest, the sound grew closer. It sounded like a growl, but too deep to belong to any ordinary animal. Jack decided to go outside with a flashlight. Linda stayed in the house, peering fearfully out the window. Jack returned a few minutes later, but his face was pale. "There are strange footprints," he said, slamming the door shut. "What kind of footprints?" "They're huge," he muttered, "like a bear's, but elongated." The next morning, Linda found an old book in the closet. It was tattered, the pages yellowed, and the text partially erased. On one of the pages was a silhouette of a huge beast with fiery eyes. Underneath the drawing was the words, "Spirit of the forest, beware his wrath." "Jack, you have to see this," she called out. Jack took a quick glance at the text, but dismissed it. "They're fairy tales. Do you want me to be scared of children's horror stories?" Linda was sure, however, that it wasn't just a fairy tale. The day passed quietly, but as night fell, the atmosphere became oppressive again. Jack went out to get firewood, but disappeared for half an hour. When he returned, his face was haggard. "There's someone out there," he said. "I heard someone whisper my name." On the third night, it became clear they were not alone. The beast was hunting them. It did not attack at once, playing with them, depriving them of sleep, driving them mad. Jack set a trap near the house, but in the morning it was broken, and claw marks were left in the snow. Soon the beast became more aggressive. One night, the door of the cabin shook as if it were being kicked in. Jack and Linda, armed with a shotgun and knife, prepared for defense. The story reaches its climax. The beast bursts into the cabin, showing its terrifying strength. Jack sacrifices himself so that Linda can get out in time. Linda, who has lost everything, wanders through the woods trying to escape, but feels the creature stalking her. The ending remains ambiguous, with the forest absorbing her scream and her footprints in the snow disappearing under a new layer. Linda ran out of the cabin without feeling the cold. The snow blinded her eyes, and her breath turned into clouds of vapor. The wind chased her away, but she knew the beast was coming for her. His footsteps rumbled heavily in the snow, echoing in the silence of the night. "Jack?" she whispered, unable to believe he was gone. Jack had fought as hard as he could. His screams still echoed in Linda's ears, but she knew that if she stopped, she would be the next victim. The forest, which had seemed cozy by day, turned into chaos at night. The trees bent their dark branches as if they were trying to grab her, and the sounds around her did not stop. There was the heavy breathing of a beast, then a rustle under the snow. "Help!" she shouted, but only the echo answered her. Linda came upon an old hunting tower, half destroyed by time. She grabbed the ladder and started climbing up, not thinking about whether the structure could support her weight. As she climbed up, she pressed herself against the wall, trying to keep from shivering. But the beast was already close. It was pacing in a circle around the tower, its burning eyes standing out in the darkness. Now Linda could see it. White fur covered with bloody spots, a mouth with long teeth, claws leaving deep marks in the snow. "It's impossible," she whispered. She remembered the text from the book. An ancient spirit of the forest, a curse born of man's greed. It protects its lands from those who desecrate them. "We haven't done anything," she shouted down, but the beast seemed to understand her. He stopped and looked directly into her eyes, as if assessing whether to kill her now or later. For a moment the beast disappeared, vanishing into the shadows of the trees. Linda carefully climbed down from the tower and ran on. She knew that stopping meant death. The snow beneath her feet was deep, and her legs began to shake with fatigue. Suddenly there was a light ahead, a small light flickering through the trees. It was another cabin, abandoned and old. Linda ran inside, slammed the door shut, and pressed her back against it. The hut was empty. Only a massive wooden chest stood in the middle of the room. There were strange symbols carved on the lid. She stepped closer, feeling the cold creep through the walls. The symbols looked familiar to her, the same ones she'd seen in the book. "It's a trap," she told herself, but she had no choice. Outside, footsteps sounded again, then a deep growl. The beast broke into the cabin, blowing the door to splinters. Linda stood in front of the chest, trembling with terror, but didn't move. "What do you want?" she screamed. The beast stopped. His eyes burned, but it didn't attack. Linda realized that the chest was the key. Perhaps there was something inside that could save her. She slowly opened the lid. Inside lay an old dagger with runes on the blade. As soon as she picked it up, the beast roared and lunged at her. The dagger flashed with a bright light. Linda felt something ancient come alive in her hands. She struck the dagger, and the beast shrieked as its body began to melt into ash. When all was quiet, Linda stood in the middle of the ruined hut, clutching the dagger. The beast was gone, but the forest seemed just as dark and threatening. She made her way outside and walked forward, not knowing where she was going. The night was endless and the snow continued to fall. Soon she saw the headlights of a car. The forest rangers had found her, exhausted and barely alive. "It's a miracle you survived," one of them said. But Linda knew the beast was not gone forever. The forest was alive, and evil still slumbered in its depths, ready to awaken if anyone disturbed its peace. Linda, rescued by the rangers, spent a few days in the hospital recovering from the horror. Her stories about the white beast and the ancient dagger made the doctors and police skeptical, writing it all off as shock and overwork. After she was discharged, she returned to the city, but the nightmares never left her. In her dreams, she saw the burning eyes of the beast again and felt the cold of the forest. Linda decided that the only way to get rid of it was to understand what she was facing. She began researching local legends and myths associated with the forests of America. She was particularly interested in the Bennington Triangle in Vermont, a place known for its mysterious disappearances and legends of mysterious creatures. Linda contacted local paranormal researchers and traveled to Vermont. There she learned about the Bennington monster, a Sasquatch-like creature seen in these woods. Locals reported strange sounds, lights, and unexplained phenomena in the woods. One night, while in a tent at the edge of the forest, Linda heard a familiar growl. Her heart sank, but she decided not to run. Stepping outside with a flashlight, she saw a shadow flickering between the trees. Gathering all her courage, Linda followed it. Deep in the woods, she came across an old stone with symbols carved into it, similar to those on the dagger. Suddenly, a beast appeared in front of her, but this time there was no rage in its eyes, only sadness. Linda realized that the beast was an ancient spirit guarding the forest from uninvited guests. She knelt down and spoke the words from the book she was studying. "I recognize your power and apologize for the intrusion." The beast approached, its breath cold on her, but it did not attack. Instead, it slowly dissolved into the air, leaving behind only the slight scent of pine. Linda returned to the camp, feeling that her mission was complete. She realized that respect for nature and its mysteries is the key to harmony between man and the world around him. After returning home, Linda wrote a book about her adventures, warning others about the importance of respecting the forces we can't always understand. Her story became a reminder that some of nature's mysteries are better left unsolved. Dark menace. It had been a year since Linda had returned home. Time was slowly healing her wounds, but the nightmares still wouldn't let her go. She often woke up in the night, remembering the burning eyes of the beast. However, her rescue seemed like a completed story until strange events began to unfold. One night, Linda received a message from the ranger who had rescued her then in the forest. It was short. "Linda, you have to come back. The forest has come alive again. But this time it's something else." Her heart sank. She tried to put the past behind her, but she knew the forest was calling her. Linda packed her bags and headed for Montana, back to where it all began. The ranger, whose name was Mark, met her at the roadside. His face looked haggard, and his eyes kept darting around. "There's something new here," he said as they entered the ranger's hut. "After you left, we thought it was all over. But recently, animals started disappearing. And then people." Linda could feel the anxiety hanging in the air. "Did you see anything?" she asked. "One of the rangers got a message," Mark said quietly. "He said it wasn't an animal. A shadow." Linda felt a chill run down her spine. A shadow, a creature that leaves no trace, but consumes everything in its path. A shadow appears. That same night, Linda and Mark traveled deep into the woods. They reached the place where it all began, the very cabin where Linda had met the beast. The forest was unaccustomedly quiet, with only the wind whispering in the branches. Linda felt a pressure in the air, as if someone was watching. And suddenly it appeared, a shadow, a black, thick mass that moved like a living thing. It hovered above the ground, emitting a low rumbling sound. "It's not a spirit," Linda whispered. "It's something ancient." The shadow lunged at them. Mark managed to push Linda out of harm's way, but he was caught in its embrace. His scream echoed through the forest and then disappeared with him. Linda ran in terror. She knew she couldn't defeat this creature just like that. She must find a way to understand what it wanted and how to stop it. Linda thought of the symbol chest and the ancient dagger. Perhaps the clue lay there. She went back to the cabin and started looking, but the chest was empty. Then she decided to go back to an old book she had once found. The book spoke of the shadow of the world, a creature that appears when the balance of nature is disturbed. The beast she had destroyed was its counterbalance. With his death, the shadow gained its freedom. "So I created this threat," Linda whispered. She realized she had to restore the balance. Linda traveled to the sanctuary of the forest, the old stone circle she had seen in her visions. There she found the remains of a beast that had become ash after their last encounter. Using an ancient dagger, Linda performed a ritual to summon the beast back. She didn't know if it would work, but there was no other choice. A shadow appeared, trying to stop her, but Linda continued despite the pain and fear. She could feel the dagger heating up in her hands and the air around her vibrating. And then the beast returned. Its eyes lit up again, and it lunged at Shadow. The two ancient creatures fought until the forest was filled with a deafening scream. Eventually the shadow disappeared, and the beast stood before Linda. This time he didn't seem hostile. His gaze was calm, almost grateful. The beast vanished into thin air, and Linda felt the forest come alive again. Linda left Montana knowing that her duty was done. The forest no longer called to her, and the nightmares were finally gone. She realized that sometimes, to defeat darkness, One must acknowledge its existence and find balance. And that nature, no matter how frightening it may seem, always seeks to restore its order. A call from the Thicket. The deep forests on the Oregon-Washington border have always terrified the locals. According to them, deep in the woods lived an ancient beast that would come out to hunt if anyone disturbed its peace. The legend has been passed down from generation to generation, but modern society has long forgotten about it. Kayla, a wildlife photographer, didn't believe in such tales. She came to this wilderness to take a series of images for her new exhibition. Peace and quiet, she thought as she set up camp in the valley. The locals she'd met before the hike had been emphatic in their warnings. Go no farther than the stone arch. This is the land of the beast. Kayla only grinned. The first day passed quietly. She photographed snow-covered fir trees and the brittle ice on frozen streams. But by evening, she began to feel like someone was watching her. First it was a rustling in the bushes, then strange footprints like clawed paws that disappeared into the snow. The next day, she crossed a stone archway without even noticing it. The forest had changed. It grew quieter and quieter, as if nature itself was afraid to make sounds. The sky darkened, though it was still morning. Kayla felt her heart racing. Soon she found a strange tree. Its bark was riddled with deep furrows, and at its base was a pile of bones, not animal bones. It's weird, she muttered, taking a few pictures. That night at the camp, Kayla heard a loud growl. It was so low that the ground seemed to vibrate beneath her feet. She stepped out of the tent with a flashlight and saw the eyes bright red, glittering in the darkness. The creature was huge, its fur shimmering black and gray and foam dripping from its mouth. Kayla froze in place. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't. The beast snarled, its claws leaving deep furrows in the snow. She did the only thing that came to mind. She ran. Kayla ran, unable to see the road, branches scratching her face, snow clinging to her boots. At one point, she felt herself losing her bearings. The forest seemed like an endless maze, but the beast kept up. Its roar grew closer, its footsteps heavier. Kayla tripped over a root and fell, losing her camera. She got up, only to realize she was in a strange clearing, surrounded by rocks with ancient symbols carved into them. The beast stopped at the edge of the clearing. It looked at her, but didn't move. "What do you want?" she shouted, more out of desperation than hope for an answer. But the beast suddenly retreated, disappearing into the darkness. Kayla spent the night in the clearing, afraid to go beyond it. In the morning, she found an old wooden hut she hadn't noticed before. Inside were books, maps, and a journal left by someone who had also encountered the creature. The diary said, "It is not a beast, but a guardian. It protects what is buried deep in the forest. Never take what does not belong to you." Kayla remembered that she had accidentally picked up a strange stone near the tree with the bones, thinking it was an interesting artifact. Is it because of this? She muttered. She decided to return the stone to where she found it. Walking back to the tree, Kayla put the stone back where it belonged. She heard a low growl behind her. The beast reappeared, but this time it didn't attack. Its eyes were less bright and its breathing was even. It walked over to a tree, tucked its nose into the stone, and then disappeared into the shadows of the forest. The forest came back to life. The birds sang again. The wind rumbled. Kayla realized that she had been given a chance. She gathered her things and left the forest, never turning around again. When she returned home, she decided not to publish the pictures she had taken. The story remained her secret. She knew that the beast continued to guard her forest, and that sometimes nature does not tolerate human intrusion. A few months passed after Kayla's encounter with the guardian of the forest. She returned to her normal life, but increasingly she caught herself feeling that the forest was still calling to her. Strange things began to happen in her apartment. Claw-like prints appeared on the glass of the windows, red eyes flashed in the mirror, and wind whispered from nowhere. She thought it was over when the stone returned, but it seemed to be just the beginning. One night, Kayla heard a knock on the door. A man with a haggard face and a worried look stood on the doorstep. "Are you Kayla?" he asked, in a trembling voice. "Yes, I am. Who are you?" "My name is Andrew. I'm a researcher. I need your help. It's about that beast." Andrew told Kayla that he was researching ancient myths and legends related to nature spirits. His research led him to the very forests where Kayla had traveled. He learned of her story through locals who said she was the only one who came back alive. "But the problem is that the beast no longer guards the forest," Andrew said. "After you left, someone or something different." Kayla felt her heart sink. "Are you saying that the guardian is gone?" "Yes. And now the forest belongs not to him, but to a darker force. The disappearances continue, and the locals tell me that the beast they see is no more." Andrew showed Kayla the photos. They showed creepy claw-like tracks, but they led towards the village. This meant that the new beast was not only attacking those who entered the forest, but also those who lived nearby. Kayla didn't want to go back into that forest, but she realized she couldn't ignore it. Andrew convinced her that she was the only one who could help restore the balance since she had already made contact with the keeper. They gathered their gear and set off. This time Kayla took with her an old book and journal she had found in the hut. She hoped there was a clue in there on how to bring back the old beast. Deep in the forest, where once there had been peace and quiet, they felt the presence of something alien. The air became heavy and the trees seemed to lean toward them, blocking their path. And then they saw it. The new beast was even bigger and scarier. Its body was covered with thick black fur, and its eyes glowed with a white light. Vapor was spewing out of its mouth as if it was made up of smoke. Kayla felt fear gripping her. "It's not a keeper," Andrew whispered. The beast roared and lunged in their direction. Kayla and Andrew barely had time to take cover in the cave, which turned out to be an ancient shrine. On its walls were carved the same symbols she had seen earlier. Kayla realized that these symbols were the key. The book said they could summon the guardian back if used in the right order. "We should try it," she said as she read the ancient words. But while they were trying to decipher the text, the beast was already near. Its claws scraped against the stone, and it tore the air with a roar as it made its way inside. When the beast had almost reached them, Kayla spoke the last words of the spell. The cave lit up brightly, and the old guardian, the same beast that had saved her, appeared on her doorstep. A new beast lunged at him, and the forest was filled with the sounds of fighting. The two creatures fought like ancient enemies, and the ground beneath them trembled. Kayla and Andrew could only watch, holding their breath. In the end, the keeper emerged victorious. The dark beast dissipated, leaving only a plume of smoke. The guardian looked up at Kayla. His gaze was full of gratitude, but also a warning. He took a step toward the forest and vanished into the thick fog. Kayla realized that her duty was done. The forest was safe again, but she knew that now she could never forget what lurked beyond the boundaries of human understanding. She left the forest, promising herself never to disturb its peace again.